Title: Shadows at the Midnight Pump. It was a quiet, eerie night at the gas station as I stood behind the counter, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the empty aisles. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerators and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. Little did I know, this night would become a nightmare I'd never forget. As the clock struck midnight, a sense of unease settled over me, a feeling that something was not quite right. I glanced out the window, scanning the deserted parking lot for any signs of life, but all was still and silent. Just as I was about to shake off my apprehension, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure standing at one of the gas pumps, obscured by the darkness of the night. Heart pounding, I stepped closer to the window for a better look, my breath catching in my throat as I realized the figure was not alone. Beside it stood another figure, its form twisted and contorted like a grotesque caricature of a human being. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its mouth curled into a wicked grin that sent shivers down my spine. Frozen with fear, I watched as the figures drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate as though they were stalking prey. With each step, the air grew thick with an oppressive energy, the temperature dropping until I could see my breath in the air before me. Desperate for escape, I stumbled backwards, my heart racing with terror as I fumbled for the phone to call for help. But as I dialed the number, a sense of dread washed over me. There was no signal, no lifeline to the outside world. I was completely alone, at the mercy of whatever lurked outside. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I turned and fled into the depths of the gas station, the shadows closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. But no matter where I turned, I could feel their presence looming over me, their icy fingers reaching out to claim me as their own. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the figures were upon me, their twisted forms writhing and contorting in the darkness as they closed in for the kill. With a scream, I lashed out blindly, my fists connecting with nothing but empty air as I fought for my life against the unseen horrors that surrounded me. But it was no use. The figures were relentless, their grip tightening around me with each passing moment until I could no longer breathe, no longer think, no longer feel anything but the suffocating darkness closing in around me. And as I succumbed to the darkness, I knew that I would never escape the horrors that lurked at the gas station at midnight, forever doomed to wander the shadows as one of their own. Title: The Midnight Journey. In the quiet town of Ravenwood, where the streets were deserted and the houses shrouded in darkness, lived Emily, a college student who commuted home late at night after her evening classes. Each night she followed the same path through the silent streets, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. One evening, as Emily made her way home from college, a chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down her spine. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an airy glow over the deserted streets as she walked alone in the darkness. As she turned the corner onto Elm Street, Emily felt a sense of unease settle over her, a feeling that she was being watched by unseen eyes from the shadows. But she brushed off her fears and pressed on, eager to reach the safety of her home. But just as she was about to reach her front door, a movement caught her eye, a figure standing in the darkness, its form obscured by the veil of night. Heart pounding, Emily stepped closer for a better look, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the figure was not alone. Beside it stood another shadowy form, its features twisted and contorted like a nightmare come to life. Frozen with fear, Emily watched in horror as the figures drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate as though they were stalking prey. Desperate for escape, Emily stumbled backwards, her heart racing with terror as she fumbled for her phone. But to her horror, the battery was dead, leaving her shrouded in darkness with only the faint glow of the moon to guide her way. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Emily turned and fled down the street, her footsteps echoing through the empty town as she raced towards the safety of her home. But just as she reached the front door, she heard a bone-chilling howl behind her, the sound reverberating through the darkness like a death knell. With a scream, Emily flung open the door and stumbled inside, her mind reeling with fear as she slammed the door shut behind her. And as she collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath, she knew that she would never forget the horrors she had witnessed on that fateful night in Ravenwood. Title: The Haunted Pit Stop. It was past midnight when Jack, a weary truck driver, pulled into a deserted roadside diner nestled among the whispering pines. The air was thick with an eerie silence as he parked his rig and stepped out into the chilly night, the only sound the distant hum of his engine echoing through the empty lot. As Jack entered the diner, a chill ran down his spine, the air heavy with the scent of grease and decay. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor as he made his way to the counter. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman, her face obscured by shadows as she wiped down the surface with a ragged cloth. Her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as she greeted Jack with a toothless smile, her voice a low, rasping whisper that sent shivers down his spine. Uneasy, Jack ordered a cup of coffee and took a seat at the counter, his eyes darting nervously around the empty diner. But as he sipped his drink, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right, that he was being watched by unseen eyes from the darkness. Just as he was about to leave, a movement caught his eye, a figure standing in the corner of the diner, its form shrouded in the shadows. Heart pounding, Jack stepped closer for a better look, his breath catching in his throat as he realized the figure was not alone. Beside it stood another shadowy form, its features twisted and contorted like a nightmare come to life. Frozen with fear, Jack watched in horror as the figures drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate as though they were stalking prey. Desperate for escape, Jack stumbled backwards, his heart racing with terror as he fumbled for the door. But to his horror, it was locked, leaving him trapped in the darkness with only the spectral figures for company. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Jack turned and fled into the night, his footsteps echoing through the empty lot as he raced towards the safety of his truck. But just as he reached the door, he heard a bone-chilling howl behind him, the sound reverberating through the darkness like a death knell. With a scream, Jack flung open the door and stumbled inside, his mind reeling with fear as he slammed the door shut behind him. And as he drove away into the night, he knew that he would never forget the horrors he had witnessed in that haunted diner by the roadside. Title: Into the Night's Embrace. The darkness was thick as ink as I set out on my solitary drive through the desolate countryside. The only company I had was the soft hum of the engine and the faint glow of the dashboard lights casting eerie shadows across the interior of the car. It was the kind of night that sent shivers down your spine, where every shadow seemed to hold a secret, and every creak of the car felt like a whisper from the unknown. As I navigated the winding roads, my mind wandered to the stories I'd heard of this remote stretch of highway, tales of ghostly apparitions and vanishing hitchhikers that haunted the lonely travelers who dared to venture into the darkness. But despite the warnings, I pressed on, my curiosity outweighing my fear as I sought solace in the solitude of the night. With each passing mile, the darkness seemed to close in around me, the road stretching out before me like an endless ribbon of black. But just as I began to lose myself in the rhythm of the drive, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure standing on the side of the road, shrouded in darkness. Heart pounding, I slowed the car to a stop, my breath catching in my throat as I peered through the darkness to get a better look. The figure stood motionless, its form obscured by the shadows. But there was something about it, something that sent a chill down my spine and set my pulse racing with fear. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I rolled down the window and called out to the figure, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "Hey, "Are you okay?" I shouted into the darkness, the sound of my own voice echoing through the empty night. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. And then, to my horror, the figure began to move, slowly, deliberately, towards the car. With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal and tore down the road, my heart racing with fear as I fled from whatever lurked in the darkness behind me. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that something sinister was hot on my trail, its icy fingers reaching out to claim me as its own. As the miles stretched on and the night wore on, I felt as though I was being pulled deeper and deeper into the darkness, the road twisting and turning like a maze of shadows. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take another minute of the relentless fear, I saw it. A flicker of light on the horizon, the first glimmer of dawn breaking through the darkness like a beacon of hope. With a sense of relief washing over me, I pressed on towards the light, leaving the terrors of the night behind me in a flurry of dust and darkness. But deep down, I knew that the memory of that fateful drive would stay with me forever, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond the edge of the unknown.